change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
All right, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell. I'm super excited to have a special guest with us today. It's a person that I've only gotten to know more recently after joining Virtuous about 10 weeks ago. I was introduced to Jason VanLue as someone that was critical at Virtuous and basically helping bring our products to life and kind of steer a lot of the things that we do directionally. So it's a person that I've kind of hitched my wagon to and just really observing and watching. He happens to be super smart, also super interesting, but he's also super nice, like the full trifecta package. Jason VanLue, welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast.
Wow, that's incredibly kind. I may have to take the recording and play it for my wife later.
No doubt. I'll give you the transcript. You can throw that back at your wife and kids. So super excited to have you here. We've talked about this a while ago. I've actually seen you interview people. In fact, I watched you interview Aaron McHugh-Safe from Microsoft during the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. And you just have this like very fluid way of like making complex things seem super easy. Now, knowing that a lot of our audience is, lay audience, fundraisers, prospect development people, stewardship people, like it's going to be great to like unpack some of these terms and some of the ideas. Like we've got a lot of ground to cover today, from kind of the essence of what you do and what led you to today, but all the way down to a few books that you've written and kind of your principles around design thinking, which I think is important to unpack. And then one of my least favorite words is vibe. In fact, my GPT has special instructions to never use the vibe and use the word vibe in an article that I'm doing. But we're going to talk about vibe coding because it's something that I'm sure you're like extremely into right now and seeing just crazy shifts in how things get done. So yeah. You ready to jump in and cover all this ground?
Love it. Let's do it. You're from California. I live by the beach. So like vibes is a huge thing. Like that's just kind of like what exists around here, right?
Yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why it's just like so cliche, is like it's like the vibe. And this is not to digress too much before we get into real stuff. I promise people that we'll actually get into real thing. The word vibe, actually, when you think about it, actually conjures a lot of like sentiment. So it's a really powerful word to like articulate like the essence of a lot of things. Like it's just like you walk into a hotel room and it's like a weird vibe or a gala or something. And it's weird. It's like hard to describe it in other ways. So it's actually a really powerful word. But in GPT world, there's things like that are just like gnaw at me. Like I would never actually use the word vibe when I'm describing like, oh, this is a cool vibe. It's vibe and M dashes. I have this like literally like I have this rant with M dashes.
That's
and
so funny. I actually love them.
Because do you really?
Yeah.
From a design perspective?
Probably too much. I don't know that I've fully explored that. I don't love semicolons or colons. So like I've always just sort of avoided those. But yeah, that's actually funny.
So the M dash, well, one is because it's a telltale sign that someone's written by AI. Now, I find that designers love M dashes because they look pretty. I always replace mine with a regular dash so that it's not like this like watermark that you used AI, and I don't want to, diminish any of it. But even if you give, this is just a pro tip for anyone, even if you give your GPT a special instruction not to use M dash, it will still use M dash. And so I have something that is basically a secret thing where I say hashtag pineapple, and hashtag pineapple is basically instruction to my GPT to rescrub what it wrote and then remove M dashes. It only works about 50% of the time. And it turns out it's because text editors, basically, it's like when you hit like spacebar, and it creates a period.
Yeah.
And M dash is actually a reflection of a text editor, which is what GPTs are using. It took me like 2 hours, like having a rant with my GPT to find out like what was going on. So pro tip over hashtag pineapple, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I'm probably in trouble because I've been using M dashes for a really long time now. So like the stuff that I write, I promise is not fully generated by AI, but it does have a lot of M dashes in it.
So you're the reason then why M dashes exist in large language models, because it picked up on all your writing.
Right, exactly.
Right. It's all you. Yeah. I mean, it comes from somewhere. So, all right, well, let's just rewind the clock. So thinking about your background and your history, you have a really interesting background. And even before, when we were just connecting. I had no idea that you had done all the things that you've done. And frankly, we'll just kind of go into it. You started out in this idea of design thinking, or you actually started like in SaaS and software as a service, just so those that don't know what SaaS is, and design like in 2005, 2007. You must have been like 8 years old.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. It was kind of an interesting time. I mean, honestly, I'll say this out of the gate because you've already been super kind. In many ways, I still have no idea what I'm doing, and certainly did not like know what I was doing. I studied economics in school, and which is actually kind of really cool, I think, because it has come more full circle, especially on like the international economic development side, which is what I really kind of specialized in now that I'm working in the nonprofit sector. But out of college, I ended up working for my dad, who is a physician. And so my wife worked for him as well. I actually knew my wife and her family all the way back to when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So it's not like I met her there, but my dad claims that he put us together. And so he's still keeping that. But coming out of college, working for him, one of the big things back in 2005, 2006 that I got into first was the whole idea of like branding and what branding actually means. His medical practice, he's a family practitioner and then also does like sports medicine. So he was the team physician for the Orlando Magic back in the day. And he was well ahead of his time when it came to his like approach to medicine. He really so like the way that he would describe it is that traditional medicine was basically sick care. Like it wasn't wellness based. Its primary outcome was not driven by how do we help people get better? It's ultimately how do we just maintain their level of unwellness? And so his whole idea was building a practice based around functional wellness and kind of what all that looks like. So anyway, he had challenges around just kind of branding that whole idea. So how do you tell that story? How do you communicate, the underpinnings of it? So that's how I like initially got into the digital sphere. Honestly, didn't plan on it, didn't like formally study anything around it, but was really interested even back then around the concepts of storytelling, problem solving, thinking about these outcomes that we want to achieve, working backwards from that to kind of figure out the tactical ways to make that happen. And then over the next several years, got more and more into the software space. And back then, like the iPhone came out, in 2007 or 2008, like somewhere around there. So that was like a really interesting time as well. And the more and more that I got into kind of software development, product development over the years, that's kind of how it expanded more to what I'm doing today, which is building software products, building kind of digital brands and experiences and all of the different things that kind of are encompassed, within that.
Yeah. I mean, that was an exciting time when we went from like products as just function and truly like you buy this thing because it actually did something novel to the iPhone that did something novel and looked cool and felt cool and represented something more than just function. And so I can imagine that would have been a formative time to just be like coming into your own and thinking about what does this mean? I mean, Apple created a culture around that, right? And not just like, oh, we have these really innovative products and that's how products are sold before. I think that's so interesting. Actually, going back, our paths are actually very aligned. In fact, I never planned on going into anything tech related. I was using my paper route money to subscribe to Adweek and Brandweek at a young age. Like it was kind of absurd because those were trade magazines that were very expensive. I mean, back then, I think it was like $80 a year for like Brandweek or Adweek, and both of them, there's no discounts. And I subscribed to both. I mean, it's literally like using my paper route money or the video store money that I worked at. Because I just was so enamored with like, how does like a cool idea manifest into something that people use? And I actually sold my second business and had started my MBA. My plan was finish my MBA, go to Madison Avenue and work in brand. Like that was like literally my clear path. And I've told people the story, but I was serving on a board of directors at a local Boys and Girls Club. And during a board meeting, the director quit. And because I was going to school, I had sold my business. I had a little bit of money to not work. I was like, well, I'll take care of things for a little while. And I had no idea that would lead me to a 20-year career in the nonprofit sector. But that's amazing. So like, I think that's probably why I just like watching you work and kind of the essence of kind of where you're seeing things kind of not just like build cool things, but change the way people think about them, change the way people work with them. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So also when you were about 8 years old, you wrote a book. And so this is like this crazy, like, Jason, you're just like one of those, like you peel back the onion and there's like all these like interesting layers. So in 2012, you wrote a book and it sold around 12,000-ish copies, but probably still selling copies. I don't know if you still get royalty checks here and there because it just like trickles in. But you wrote a book called Branding Matters. And so for the audience, like what led you to writing that book first? I mean, other than just being interested. And what were you trying to achieve when you did that?
Yeah. So coming out of that kind of initial experience working for my dad, getting a little bit more into the software tech side of things, so I ran 2 product development agencies before I came to Virtuous ultimately. And so a large amount of my career has been more on the agency consulting side. So, building custom software, building custom products for small businesses, but also have worked with Google, Cisco, Arnold Palmer Hospital, number of universities. And throughout all of that, I think like this is going to be a gross oversimplification. So forgive me in advance. But ultimately, I believe that we as humans were created to be in relationships, were created to serve others, and sort of by proxy to that, I think solve problems. I think we all have an innate desire to build better. One of the values that we have here at Virtuous, just to make the world around us better in some way, shape, or form. And we're wired for stories. Like we resonate with narratives and with storytelling. And so if you kind of pull that over into the business world, into the tech world, even in the nonprofit world, that whole idea of storytelling is super important. So like you obviously understand with your background, but when you think about a brand, like oftentimes it's less and less these days, but back then it was like, well, a brand is a logo or a brand is some particular design artifact or like something. And so Marty Neumeier, wrote the book Zag. And so his whole premise was a brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. It's the collection of thoughts and feelings and understanding of all of the ways that they engage with your organization. So if you think about, Nike or Apple or Microsoft, like what comes to mind, and what comes to mind is ultimately your perception of their brand. So this whole concept and kind of the underlying tenets are around how do you build that story? Like ultimately, what are you trying to tell? And how can you understand, the best ways to do that? And at that time, I mean, I was working with businesses and organizations that were still pretty small, nothing super crazy. And so a lot of these concepts were a bit foreign to them. And so as you started to look at things a little bit more holistically and think about it in that human-centered context, I found that folks resonated with it and it helped them build a much stronger strategy around how they're presenting themselves, whether it's digitally or whether it's through print or just like how they talk on the phone, how they engage when you come into the office, like what's the experience all across the board? What are all those different touch points? So that was kind of the impetus for that particular book, especially corresponding with some of the work that I was doing, 13, 14, 15 years ago, which is crazy.
Well, what's interesting too, is I'm thinking about, as you're sharing that, is that spending 20 years in the nonprofit sector, I saw the power of storytelling early on. Like I figured 2000, when I did a bunch of training with Boys and Girls of America, it was all about telling stories. And to your point, the private sector was not there. We in the nonprofit sector understood the balance between the heart and the wallet. Yep. And so that we had to tell stories to kind of unlock that potential. Something transitioned, and I think you've already alluded to this, but like over, from then till now, from, 2000 to especially to 2020, but beyond, for-profit entities fully understand the balance between the heart and the wallet, and they're using stories and identity to really attract that. So before we close up this portion and talk about your next book, do you feel like the principles are still valid for the social sector? Are they more important than for the social sector? Are there things that, it's like if you could like shake a nonprofit executive to be like, do more of this, is there something from that side that you would share?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I have so much respect for the nonprofit sector, for folks who are leading these impact organizations. It is the primary reason why I'm at Virtuous. It's been in my heart since college and even before that. I went on a number of missions trips through high school and college. And then after I was married, specifically to Bolivia and Haiti, I think there was 5 or 6 during that time. And so really just ingrained in me, I think fundamentally just the the impact of serving others. And so like just have a ton of respect. And I think that you're exactly right. I think by and large, the nonprofit sector has done an amazing job telling these stories. And you kind of have to, right? There's real problems in the world. You're seeking to redeem whatever, impact area that you're working in, and you have to be able to tell that story. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed, I don't know if this is true or not, but one of the things that I've noticed is that I think one of the big missing pieces is not so much the story. I think folks are doing a pretty good job telling the story, but I don't think there's a connection to the actual donor or supporter for why they care about that story. I think that's still kind of a big missing piece. And that speaks to sort of the philosophy that we have at Virtuous around responsive fundraising and how do you connect on a much more personal level. So for example, there's a local organization that my family and I support, Foster Florida. They're, Northeast Florida foster care, foster advocacy group, really doing some amazing work. And they tell their story really well. They have great branding. They've got great design. They've got really good storytelling. But on the surface, even if you knew like some of the superficial things about me through a quick Google search, I don't know that you'd be able to understand why like I would care about that story. And the reason that I care about that story so much is because I have 3 adopted sisters, 2 of which went through the foster care system in Florida. They're much younger than me, but I was there sort of in the formative years as they were going through that and kind of watching my parents go through that. So I have a very personal connection to foster care in Florida and understanding, the challenges that goes into matching and home visits. And there were a number of kids that ultimately my parents weren't able to adopt. So there's a very personal connection to that. And so the more that organizations can employ design thinking, some of the things that I'm sure we'll get into, to make that connection, I think that's still like the big missing piece, because ultimately donors and supporters, even if they can't articulate it, like there is a really compelling reason why they gave in the first place, or why they volunteered in the first place, or why they care. And so the more that you can kind of connect those dots, that's how you're going to build lifelong advocates, more so than just, hey, how can we tell our story better? It's more like, how can we understand why this story resonates in the heart of the person that we're talking to?
Yeah, that's an awesome point. And I find that when, I was a nonprofit consultant for a while with CCS, and it's so interesting because for some reason, a lot of nonprofits are hesitant to ask what that origin story is. And it's like, if you want to know, all you have to do is ask, because everyone wants to tell you. They all want to tell you, why does that thing make my heart beat a little faster, or just really create kind of this sense of belonging for me. And so I really encourage organizations to think about in very scalable, affordable ways of doing surveys. Charity Water does a really great job. If you make a gift, the first thing you get is a survey. It's like, what led you to this? Like, what's on your mind, and what do you like about us, and how do you want us to communicate? And so that's awesome. Another parallel story. It's really kind of weird how our lives are connected. My father-in-law was a clinician, old school clinician. It was actually my pediatrician, but my wife and I started dating in high school. And he kind of adopted me, paid for my college and all those things. So there's that. And I really get that kind of this probably leads to why I'll kind of weave into this next part is you're really into problem solving. Mm-hmm. And, clinicians really are always about problem solving, right? And so a patient comes in, there's a confluence of all these different things, and you have to really reverse engineer, what is the core of this thing? So you kind of had grown up in that. Side note too, my mom was a foster parent because I grew up in a single parent household. And one of the ways that she was able to stay home when I was little was to be a foster parent. So I actually grew up with foster kids and shared Christmas and birthdays with them for most of my childhood. And a lot of our friends actually work in foster and have adopted. So that's just amazing.
Awesome.
All right. So you've got this super rich background, understanding empathy of the nonprofit sector. You didn't stop there. You've got a new book coming out. And I saw that it's almost done, available for pre-order pretty soon. Well, I'll give people the link at the end. But I'm super interested in this. So it's called the 3 pipe problems.
Yep.
You've worn this kind of mantle of nonprofit advocate, of course, but problem solving specialist. That's a kind of a unique thing. The 3 pipe problem, because you had told me kind of the genesis of this. It's super interesting. Why don't you tell the audience what does it even mean? And then what led you to deciding I'm going to write a book about this?
Yeah. So I'm a big Sir Arthur Conan Doyle fan. grew up reading Sherlock Holmes, among many other things. We could spend a whole podcast on that and really nerd out. But yeah, so big Sherlock Holmes fan. And so there's this thing that Holmes does, and it's mentioned in several different stories. I think the Red-Headed League, I think, is like the main one where this scene is played out. But Watson basically comes in and Holmes is on the couch, and they have this conversation, and Holmes is trying to solve a really, really difficult case. And he makes the remark that, this is a 3-pipe problem. And basically what that means is he's got to smoke 3 pipes in order to solve it, which is like, it just takes a lot of time, right? However long it takes to smoke a pipe times 3 is how much time he needs to spend kind of thinking about it. So the idea is that we've got a lot of 3-pipe problems in the world. We've got 1-pipe problems, 2-pipe problems, 18-pipe problems, right? But this underlying concept of problem solving, one of the core tenets of this kind of philosophy, and honestly, it's a pretty personal philosophy, is just as I was mentioning earlier, that I believe that we're all, wired for stories, but we're also created to be in relationships. We have this sort of desire to serve others. I also think that we are all equipped to be problem solvers. And one of the sort of core tenets is around this concept of like, what does it mean to be creative? Because what I've found over the years, and even going back to like the Branding Matters book as well, is you have this kind of concept where people would be like, oh, well, I'm not very creative. And usually what they mean is, well, I'm not very artistic. I have to ask others like to pick out my clothes for me because I have no concept of like what looks good or what doesn't. And so they lump this together and like, well, I'm not very creative. And then when you start getting into, okay, like, let's talk about the problems that you have in your sort of sphere of influence. And they can be like really, really big ones, like homelessness or food inequity. Or they can literally be like, there's challenges with my kids and how they're engaging in school, or we have this particular thing going on within our neighborhood. Like, they can be small things as well. And what I found, at least, was a lot of these folks would sort of just write things off as like, well, I'm not creative. I'm not like wired for that. And so as a result, the ball doesn't get moved down the field in kind of your sphere of influence. So anyway, it was, or it is a way to hopefully unpack, what does it mean for everyone to be a problem solver? How do we think about, hey, everybody actually is very creative. You may not be artistic, but that, just like branding is much more than a logo. You can actually, and are actually, a designer at heart because of the way in which you engage with solutions, and also kind of an underlying responsibility that we all carry, just like Holmes, that like, hey, there's problems to solve. And we can't just leave it up to folks in the nonprofit sector or people who feel a particular calling for this, general impact area, that we're all called to, in the sphere of influence that we have, build better, serve others, and discover problems to be solved, regardless of how many pipes it takes to kind of solve those. So those are some of the more philosophical aspects of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. And again, we'll put a link in the show notes and tell people how they can get their hands on that. It makes me think a lot about this idea, how the idea of problem solving is shifting. And as we're offloading the cognitive function of solving problems to machines, and there's like 2 schools of thought on this on the internet. Like, it's really interesting. And people that I highly respect, like Cassie Kozakov and others, are like, she's a chief decision scientist at Google and does a lot of training, is kind of like, there's this underlying narrative like, well, it doesn't matter as much anymore because we're not walking to a new town anymore. We're getting in a car, we're doing things faster, we're using the tools that we have available to us. And I have such a strong reaction to that. Like, I feel like, and Adam Grant has written about this, but it's like, in the world of like, in scarcity of information, it was about like having knowledge, but in the age of information abundance, essentially just like this information age, it's more about connecting dots. And I feel like the critical function of connecting dots is problem solving. What I hope really people pick up the book to really be challenged by, I think that is not something that's fixed. It's not like I'm good at math or I'm not good at math, or to your point, I'm creative or I'm not creative. Is that every person is able to solve problems. And I think, like anything, it's a skill that you can hone, that you can get better at, but you have to start with learning about, what it is and isn't, and then get practical guidance and tips to exercise in that problem solving. So I feel like in this age of just information abundance that problem solving is more important than ever, and to having the human element kind of stamped in there.
I 100% agree. So first, it's the question, are there problems to solve? I think we would all say, well, yeah, absolutely. The second question then to ask is, can I solve them? Should I solve them? And I think the answer to that is yes. And you should do whatever you can to unpack and identify three pipe problems, within your sphere of influence. And then the third question is, okay, cool. How do I do that? And that's where, for me, at least in my experience, the concepts of creativity, design thinking, critical thinking, empathy, adaptability, all of those kind of weave together. And I 100% agree with you. I think more than ever over the next several years, AI is really an answer tool. Again, this is going to be a gross oversimplification. It's not only that. It can synthesize information, it can predict, it can generate. There's all sorts of things that AI can do. But at least for right now, the fundamental input is still a question.
Right.
And the best way to get better at asking questions is to be able to think critically and creatively and holistically about whatever it is that you're seeking to understand. And I think when it comes to problem solving, which we do each and every day, even if we don't realize it, the skill around, okay, can I take a step back? Can I sort of sit on the Holmes couch with or without a pipe and think holistically, empathetically, creatively about whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish, whatever the outcome is that I'm going after? I think that's going to be, pun intended, a much more critical skill. Like critical thinking is even more critical moving forward, because the input is still really good question asking to actually get to the answers that are going to be the most beneficial.
Yeah, and I think we've shared this on the podcast before, but it's so important to really carve out that space, because in the age of information abundance, and as we move into 2027, and I've talked about this on the podcast, AI 2027, the information explosion, there's this like opportunity overwhelm. Like I deal with this every day. When we were talking before the podcast started that, I've been up since 4 a.m. I drafted 3 articles because it just was like all the stuff's in my head, and opportunity overwhelm can be just so much. If there's so much, that overwhelm becomes real. You just it just becomes everything and nothing. You just don't do it. And so I've had to carve out, create boundaries around this for myself. So I have a room in my house that is boring. It actually has I have an old typewriter collection and a bunch of old books and 2 chairs, a chess table, and a couch. That's it. No TV, no, nothing else. It's a no phone zone. And so the thing that I do now habitually in the morning is I go there and I wake up, and I'm more fresh in the morning. Some people are more fresh in the evening, but I go there in the no phone zone and think, and then kind of really let things kind of gel and come together. And then only then, I'll write it down. And then, so I think that is that area. I mean, I absolutely agree. Critical thinking, problem solving is something that if we parse that out and just allow machines to do that, we'll degrade the human essence. Why wouldn't we just deserve to be replaced by AI at that point? If we just acquiesce to AI to just solve all of our problems, then what is our value? I guess that's how I feel, at least.
Yeah.
So I think that boundary, I don't know if you have any kind of habits or tips on problem solving doesn't just come all the time when you're scrolling 300 feet on your phone every day. It has to come in areas where you kind of create that space for it.
Yeah, that's so good. I would argue that the best problem solving, especially now, maybe even more so now, happens on the other side of the screen. One of my core philosophies has always been to design for the other side of the screen, which is basically a paraphrase of a lot of much smarter people that have come over the last, 100 years or so around the concept of designing for people. But it's a similar concept, which is just look, at the end of the day, what does it reduces to? There's still humans that we're solving problems for, building products for, serving. The screen is not in and of itself. So I think you're 100% right. Whatever that looks like, for me, it's running, it's going on the beach, clearing my head, getting off of all of the screen so that you can then come back to it and actually be able to ask the right questions or synthesize the information, but you've given yourself that 3 pipe space, so to speak.
Yeah.
where it's just
Yeah.
more important than ever.
It's funny because I noticed this about myself for years and years ago. In fact, I was talking to a vice chancellor. I don't know why, don't ask, but like how big ideas come to me in the shower. And he also was like, big ideas come to me in the shower. And so actually, I bought 2 sets of basically there's like waterproof pencils and paper with a suction cup that you can put in the shower. And it's just hilarious. And it's because even then, I mean, this is like years before like generative AI and in social media. It's because if you provide kind of like an isolated space where you're free from a lot of distractions, you can let your brain kind of go. And so I just encourage people to, and I'm sure they're still available on Amazon. We can put that in the show notes too, your waterproof pencil.
Yeah, I'll actually send over to you just something kind of random for the show notes as well. So in my previous book, there's a really great talk. So I'll have to find it on YouTube, and it's actually by John Cleese of Monty Python fame.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like super funny,
So it's gotta be
comedian.
good.
Like, and what's funny is like this talk is like super serious. It's really good, but it's all in creativity. So going back to one of the things that we covered earlier, in my experience, a number of folks would just kind of write it off because, oh, well, it's talking about creativity. I'm not creative. And so one of his first points is that everybody's creative, but he does talk about the best ways to build creativity and to sort of grow this skill. And he has 5 things. I can't remember all of them, but 2 of the 5 are basically uninterrupted time. So he purposely includes it twice because what he would say is like when they were working on Monty Python sketches or whatever it might be, his best ideas came in those margins where he was allowing himself the space to be able to think and even subconsciously, the ability to kind of let the mind work over particular problems. So I think it's an undervalued skill, and especially in today's age with how busy we are, more important than ever.
And the thing is, I think we value it. I think we don't value it enough, I guess. And we don't create the space for it because the lure of the present is there, right? It's just like this, again, complete overwhelm with all the stimulation that we have. And we're all finding ways to deal with that. I think that will just continue. That's awesome. When we're talking about all this, I mean, in kind of leading into kind of this idea of opportunity overwhelm, a lot of it has come because building tools, and you've been able to see kind of, I'm sure, a big difference in like the acceleration of building tools and putting things into the market much, much faster. Now to a completely new age of vibe coding, which I can share or you can share a little bit about, but it's this idea that I don't think a lot of nonprofit professionals realize this, like what is available. And I say like, if you're just curious, like anything is possible. You have tools that like literally, I think there'll be this explosion of like small businesses that, are made because the tools are so available. Kind of your thoughts on that from a Virtuous perspective, what it means, and then maybe how you think about the workforce that you will hire now based on the tools that are available. I know it's a lot, so just however you want to unpack any of that.
Yeah, this is a great topic. So at sort of a high level, vibe coding. So these are tools like Replit, Cursor, Lovable. Honestly, like a lot of even the major players now too. So you look at design tools like Figma or Canva, like they're all building these kind of vibe coding functionalities into their products. And the underlying principle of it is ultimately to get to a output much, much, much faster with much more limited lo-fi inputs. So that could, let's just take an example that as a nonprofit professional, I need to have a better dashboard to be able to show real-time metrics across my organization, internally and externally. So that can be net new donors that are coming in, amount, fundraise, we have a particular event, how many attendees we had at that event. Maybe internally, we're talking about donor support, tickets that are coming in, whatever it is. Like, I just need a dashboard, right? So before you would be like, okay, cool. Is this something that maybe I could go into Excel or PowerPoint or something like that and actually build out myself? Do I have somebody on staff who is a developer that maybe could design and code up this in a few weeks or a few months? Now you could literally use one of these tools. You could literally say, I'm a nonprofit professional in this particular role. I work for this organization. Here's what I'm looking to build: a dashboard with 12 different metrics covering these areas. And I want it to be accessible for my whole team. Hit enter.
Yeah.
And then within 5 minutes, you would actually have a fully functioning artifact that basically covers that. Fully designed, fully
Yeah.
coded out, even like not to get too far in the weeds, but even to the point of databases have been set up if you need them. Authentication is set up if you need it. It's fully designed. Like it's
Yeah.
absolutely insane how fast and how easy it is to produce these artifacts now. It's
It's absolutely nuts. I mean, yeah, it puts coding into the hands of every person, and even a year ago, I mean, 2 years ago, it wasn't even a thought, right? I mean, it was just like, it was a thought, but it was just like not going to work. Even a year ago, vibe coding was still pretty technical. Like you still needed to have some code background to like understand what it was doing and fix things. And now like fast forward, I mean, even all the way into Claude, which is, really good at doing this, but playing around with tools like NAN or Lovable or, Replit that literally just take your ideas. You're like, well, I want to do a survey on, to understand donor sentiment of like why they, first gave to our organization. And literally not just like a chat GPT of like, here are questions you want to ask, but literally create a web form for you completely ready to go so that people can start with like email address validation and everything built into it. So I hope people are encouraged and they, start, and we could put a bunch of these. In fact, I created this list for Virtuous. It started out as like 50 top tools for fundraising success, and now it's like 58 tools. These AI automation workflows are in there. That document is a Google Sheet on purpose so that we can just continue to update it. And so we'll put that in there. People can download that Google Sheet, and as it continues to grow, just go along and try these new things. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting. Does it change who you would hire now in terms of like how you would have hired in the past and who you'd hire now? Because I think people need to recognize that as well.
Yeah. So I'll answer that in kind of two ways. Maybe going back just briefly, if you either haven't tried out vibe coding or like, well, this sounds cool because we're talking about vibes or like whatever. I think your list is great. What I would recommend, so try something like Lovable. That's a pretty easy one to kind of test out, especially if you're looking for something that's more of like a public artifact, whether it's like a website survey, some sort of digital artifact that you're trying to create. Start out in Claude or Chat GPT. And this is where you kind of make the connection around what we've been talking about around like, okay, can I think critically about it? Can I articulate the outcome that I'm wanting? This is where all of this sort of coalesces into one, because you need to be able to provide the right prompt, right? That's kind of the first big thing. But go to Chat GPT, go to Claude, and ask it, hey, here's what I want. I'm going to be using Lovable. Help me write a prompt. And you can go back and forth and actually get a prompt, maybe much more detailed than you would have written originally, especially if you don't have, a design background, coding background, whatever it might be. This can be really, really helpful. And then use that. And I even do that. And I found that it actually helps really kind of tailor the final output. So that may be really helpful. But yeah, the hiring piece is such a good question. And yes, I actually think it does. So a couple of things there. If we look at sort of the design thinking framework, so this was popularized by IDEO, early 2000s, or maybe even earlier than that. And fundamentally, it's about, okay, how do we design for the other side of the screen? Like humans are at the center. We want anything that we design or build to be human-centered. So they came up with a framework of kind of 5 steps. So the first being empathize, the second being definition, the third being prototyping, the fourth being ideation or iteration, and then the fifth being testing. And so the whole concept is, out of empathy, we want to make sure that we're defining the problem, that we're understanding what it is that we're trying to solve, and then we're trying to get to opportunities or solutions very quickly, and then testing those to see, are we actually right? So when it comes to like vibe coding and even more broadly, just AI in general and how it's just completely revolutionizing the landscape, I definitely think it covers the last 3 of those. So when you look at ideation, prototyping, and testing, those 3 very much now can largely be done by AI. And so as we're thinking about building enterprise software on the Virtuous side, I don't need an engineer or a designer to build everything from scratch anymore, especially when we're trying to build quickly and get quick feedback from users so that we can understand, does this actually solve the problem? But I do think that those first 2, empathy and definition, those really can't be solved by AI. Definition maybe, because you can kind of use AI to help you draft up requirements or that can be helpful. But certainly the empathy side, that's that human connection. And that's why it's first. And that's why even in kind of the way that I think about it, that's the fundamental tenet is human-centered design is very much about like, are we getting in other people's shoes and understanding what is it that's causing a problem that we can actually solve here? That's not going to be covered by AI. So that first sort of foundational thing that all other things are built on still has to be done by a human. And so as I'm looking at hiring for the future, I still think there's value in technical skills. I still very much believe that even in an AI world where we have developer agents and all of these different tools, you still need to understand the fundamentals of how software works, what makes up good design versus not, like some of those sort of fundamental principles. But I think we will definitely be indexing a lot more on critical thinking, empathy, intuition, and taste would be two other things. Like, can you, as you're stepping into other people's shoes and trying to understand them, like, do you have good intuition around what's going to be the best solution for them? Do you have good taste? Like, do you understand what quality looks like? Some of these like soft skills, we would kind of call them soft skills, but I actually think they're more of the hard skills of the future. That's going to be a lot more important in kind of how we hire technical folks.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I know a lot of people don't know about Virtuous, but I came over 10 weeks ago. I had been following Virtuous kind of from the side. I mean, I've gotten to know Gabe and the team, so a few members of the team like David and others for a while. And everything you just shared in terms of like the qualities of humans that you bring in and kind of how you approach work is like every person at Virtuous. Like, it's kind of insane because it's really unique. I think if people have ever worked in big for-profit or for-profit tech, I mean, it's basically heartless. Like, I mean, there's just not a lot of that desire to have humans at the center and just putting that heart first. And so, I mean, it really represents kind of the essence of Virtuous, which is so cool. So, I mean, we're almost out of time. I wanted to ask, so all this stuff, I mean, we've unpacked a lot. In terms of your own, you have 3 kids, so I doubt you relax very much. Is there something that you do to provide that space that carves you? I think you said running. So is it that you find yourself the ability to kind of just like, remove the distractions so that you could like get back to center?
Yeah, trying to stay active. So running, swimming, anything on the water, surfing, paddleboarding, some of those kinds of things. As the parents will know, most of the time it's spent at the soccer field or the dance studio or on the road to either one of those, things. And then honestly, I love your example too. I think I've fallen off on this recently. I need to have a little bit more self-discipline around this for sure, but just time where you're just like literally sitting in a chair in a quiet room and meditating, or at least just allowing your brain to be open. I think that's absolutely critical. Yeah, so those are some of the things. Reading as well. As I mentioned, love a good Conan Doyle story. I read Lord of the Rings every year. So, again, super big nerd, but yeah, those are fun.
That's awesome. Well, I want people to come and find your website is Jason VanLue, JasonVanLue.com. And actually, you've got some really great articles. There's articles I think people in the sector would find really helpful. So you've got the evolution of problem solving, the art of the question, like just really practical things that I think people will find. They also can go on there and sign up, at least today, sign up to be notified when your book comes out. And then once your book comes out, they'll be able to go there and buy that. So this is awesome. I really, really appreciate you jumping on all that you do at Virtuous. Virtuous is super lucky to have you and your leadership really steering our products in a way that the heart is really felt front and center. And I don't say that lightly. That's something that's just really hard to achieve and something that's so rare in today's world, even in the social sector by other companies that are really, I mean, money's important and is a primary driver. But if that's the only driver, then you'll have products that reflect that. And I think that's what's really different about your kind of view on this and your leadership.
Thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I feel really lucky. The audience for this podcast are the people that I respect the most. If I could, Virtuous, as you know, we work with thousands of folks. And if I could support each and every one of them financially with, time, skills, I 100% would, but obviously can't do that. So I feel really lucky to be able to, in some small way, build digital things that help them expand their impact, grow generosity. So ultimately, all that to say, I think I just want to, again, communicate how much respect I have for this sector and just find it absolutely amazing and challenging and encouraging for all the work that you do. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you found this helpful. If you didn't, don't tell anyone. I think it was an amazing episode, to be honest. I was really looking forward to it, and it did not disappoint. Stay tuned. Our next episode, Scott Rosencrantz will be back after his extended trip in Geneva, and we'll hear about all the things that he picked up on there too. So thank you, Jason, for everything. Thanks for the audience. And again, yeah, to echo that sentiment and the empathy for all of the hard work that goes into that burden of waking up every day and wanting to make a difference in the world. So hats off to all of you, and look forward to seeing you soon.